So that's always something that I wrestle with. I know our customers wrestle with that, how to be different and how to be unique while at the same time being consistent. And I don't think it's a problem that will ever be solved. It's just a journey that you have to go through. You have to kind of bump up against those edges and figure out where it is in order to, really get in the comfort zone that you're producing something valuable for your customers and you're actually solving problems.
Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, I'm Tristan. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. This show is brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. Now at Motion, we produce a lot of shows. We have close to 60 shows either in development or in production right now. And with each show that we launch and run, we always learn something new. But to be honest, we don't share what we learn along the way, at least not very well. So in this episode, we're going to try something new. It's a conversation between me and Justin Brown. He's my business partner and co-host of Recorded Content. And this conversation is the first in a new series that we plan called Build in Public. This will allow us to share some of the behind the scenes work that we do to launch all the shows that we produce at Motion. Let me know what you think. All right, Justin, our first behind the scenes Build in Public episode that we're going to try here today. What do you think?
First time that we've even recorded together in a while. So we'll see how it goes.
I know. I figure we talk on the phone hours maybe per day, but haven't recorded a podcast together and I don't know. It's been over a year, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting too because people ask a lot. We hear during these strategy sessions to launch new shows, people are like, "So should we do two guests or two hosts, like co-host setup?" And Tristan and I, we're like, well, we did that for a while. Now we do episodes together sometimes. So it's always interesting. There's not really a right answer, I think, for any of this.
That's right. Well, we're going to try again today. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But what we're looking to do, and I'm excited to hear some of your feedback, but we want to be able to provide a glimpse into what it takes to develop one of our own shows. So we work with a lot of customers. I mean, you're leading conversations each week with, 40 plus, 50, et cetera, customers. And we see how those shows get launched and built. And it's not really appropriate to do behind the scenes with customers per se along the way, but with ourselves, I think it can help and it can show a little bit about how we think of podcasting and the different angles that we take, because Motion has more than one show. We have, I believe, 6 right now that are running that we own that are hosted by experts in their particular field. And that's really what helps us serve our customers overall. So today with this show, I mean, the first episode, what we'll do here is go through a new show that's called On Camera, On Brand. And maybe the best way to set this up is to talk about what sparked the show to begin with. Because I feel like all of our shows, there's some reason that we set out to do them. But what do you remember when this show kind of came to the surface? Like what runs through your mind as to why we decided to do this particular show?
I think there's 2 reasons on why. One is we always operate with a little bit of a chip on our shoulders at all times. I think it helps us to be successful, but I'll touch on that one second. But I think the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is, we just wanted to be able to help the people that we work with. I think a lot of our content strategy is helping the people that we work with. And something that we see a lot is with our customers, they don't have studio setting environments that they're recording in. You take a look at one of our shows, Taking the Lead. I mean, Christina Brady's show, did extremely well for years and continues to. And for probably her first 35 to 40 episodes, she's recording with her bed in the background. And I think for us, and it'll help, Tristan, for you to give a little bit of the premise of the show. It kind of says it in the name a little bit, on camera, on brand, but we wanted to be able to help the people that we work with. Hey, we don't expect you to set up a $10,000, $20,000 studio. You're likely going to be recording from home. So how can we get you to have your environment look as professional as possible, as good as possible within the confines of what you have available to you? The second thing, that the kind of chip on the shoulder thing, is we wanted to do a show that was outside of the echo chamber of people that you always hear from. If you know anything about Motion's network of shows, we work with a lot of people who are very visible. And there's two reasons for that. One is they're visible for a reason, and that's because they're subject matter experts. And the second is because it gets us visibility. But we wanted to do a show where we talk to somebody outside of who you always hear from. And so the host of On Camera, On Brand is someone who's a director of photography, someone who's very talented in what they do, but maybe isn't as visible, isn't being heard from as often. And so that was also a piece of it. Tristan and I are always trying to branch out from the content that you're always hearing, and trying to get to our audience things that they really care about. And so that was something that, as a side piece, was obviously something I cared about.
And to your point, like, let me just go ahead and read the theme statement. And this is where we landed. And this will probably help people understand like what we're trying to accomplish. But I'll read the theme statement here. So On Camera, On Brand is a podcast for professionals who want to look good on camera, but don't have the time or expertise to get their equipment, lighting, and environment set up properly. In each episode, Rob Rusher uncovers how professionals can get the most from their home or office setups and illustrates how you can look your best while on camera. After all, if you invest the time to share your stories on camera, you should be on brand. So that's where we landed with the theme statement, and we'll get into how we arrived there and kind of the process. That's really what we want to talk about today is the early work that was done on this show. But I think this is a good segue into Rob Rusher and the host that's involved with On Camera, On Brand. And that really is to your point where, in this case, in the audience that we typically interact with, Rob isn't really interacting with B2B marketers on a daily basis.
He's doing a good job now. He's trying.
Yeah. He's getting out there and kind of, and that's been an interesting process for him because a lot of this is new territory, and that's really, what helps with podcasting overall. But Rob is he was one of the first employees that I hired at my previous agency. And you and I, of course, worked together at the previous video production agency. And Rob started out as a camera operator and really just grew into a role that is beyond what we were doing at the agency at the time. I mean, so he left the company, became a cinematographer. He does a lot of just work with feature films, music videos, television commercials. He's been all over, and I've worked with him not only at the previous agency, but we've continued to work together as we've owned Motion. I mean, he's worked on several projects with us, especially before we officially pivoted to that podcast agency that we are now. We did a lot of work in just video production and producing content for nonprofits, tech companies, of course, et cetera, all around the country. And Rob would frequently travel with me around to all these events, and we would film things, bring it back to headquarters and put it all together. So it was a good opportunity to reconnect with Rob on a project that really I think can help our particular audience. And it's interesting because Rob comes at this problem from a completely different standpoint. He's used to big sets. He's used to 10, 20 person crews oftentimes. Whereas when we're working with our customers, we're working with a CMO who's appearing on a podcast or a CEO that's hosting a podcast. They don't have a 10 person crew that can set up an environment for them every time that they need to record. So we have to find a way to solve this problem. And that's really where we landed. And that was really the spark that that started it all. It was like, how can we solve this problem for customers? The thing I wanted to talk about next, and we had a lot of conversations back and forth, it was like, why did we decide to pursue a video series / show versus perhaps a course or a guidebook? Do you remember what we were kind of going back and forth on before we decided and landed on the show?
I know for a long time we've talked about trying to do how-tos of setting up a home environment. I know we talked a little bit about, we've even provided PDFs to our customers. I don't know exactly how we landed on this being a show with Rob. And for the audience, Tristan, you talked about, flying Rob in. Rob was always the guy that we flew in. This is just a cool story for me because I didn't work always directly with him, but it was always Rob was the guy we flew in when there was a project that we were like, we need this to be like really good. And so that's kind of his background. I did want to throw that in there as you were talking about it. But yeah, I think for me, at least the reason why we knew we needed something like this is that I personally, as someone who doesn't have a background in video nearly as much as you do, and you not nearly as much as Rob does, it's tough when people ask me those questions to be basically a consultant for, setting up their video setup remotely. And I'm not fumbling my way through it. I've seen enough, hey, don't set up in front of a big window, but I don't know exactly how it transpired directly from we need this, we know we need it, how are we going to do it, to let's launch a show with Rob. So maybe you can actually tell me. I think maybe you guys were just having conversations. What led to this being the solution?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it stems from like my own insecurity. So, owning multiple video production companies, I was never the director of photography. So I always had to like learn enough to speak the language to guys like Rob. And I think in this case, I could have curated enough information to help our customers and perhaps build out a mini course or, some like long form piece of content that would help people with their setups. But I think we just started to talk and went back to really how we create all of our shows. And it's like, well, if we want a show on content marketing and what it means to be the head of content, well, that's where Camille Trent came into play. We're like, how can we find someone that can not only talk about podcasting, but can also talk about really the whole umbrella, the whole content flywheel that companies are trying to create. And that's where she came into play. And the reason she's a great fit for that show is because she is the head of content at a tech company. You and I we can't cheat that role. We can speak to some things through our own experiences, but we are not leading the content team at a tech company. So I think it just goes back to that principle where if we're going to solve this problem for customers, let's not cheat it. Let's find an expert and let's build a show around their expertise. And then that way, the information that we're able to explore and the different things that we cover in each episode will then tie into really solving a customer's problem. Really, that's what I remember about it.
Yeah, and I think, even if we take a big step back to why we're doing today's episode, and why we plan on highlighting these shows that we're building for ourselves, I think one of the things that I want to impart to the audience is you hear so much about turning your company into a media company. And Tristan and I have done this over the last 3 years. We've launched, are we at 6 shows?
Think
6 internal shows with another one on the way. And these shows have been carefully concocted based on things that our customer base is asking for. Even for us as a podcast agency that has all of the resources at our fingertips internally, it's still incredibly difficult not only to execute on the work and produce, 5, soon to be 6 every other week shows, and then this show is weekly. But aside from that, actually tackling problems that our audience is running into with experts that our audience wants to listen to. And so, I think in addition to learning about on camera, on brand, which I hope that everybody goes and listens to, another thing that you can take away from this new series that we're going to be rolling out, this won't be the first or this won't be the last of these that you hear about, of these shows that we've launched for ourselves, but also is it's fine to go out there and say, launch yourself as a media company, but we also want to say, hey, here's kind of what it takes. And here's what's going to go into each show, because we really do care a lot about every single one of these shows. And we think that every single one of these shows solves a problem. And Tristan, you can even speak to, that's what happened with Rep Your Brand that we worked with Nick Bennett on. I mean, that show did really well, but we felt like it ran its course. And we could have just said, hey, it's just a show. It keeps rolling. We pivoted that to the anonymous marketer. And that was a big thing. And we've had that on this show as well. But, we're always trying to refine these and work on them. But it also takes a lot of work, more than just saying, hey, go be a media company. And
let's kind of walk through some of that work, the foundation that we built. So when we decide to develop a show, it's kind of like we give it the thumbs up, but then it's like, all right, now what? And really the first phase is brainstorming and researching and trying to find like our spot, where this show is going to fit in the grand scheme of things. I think there's some work that's just done there that's a little bit fragmented, right? It's a little unorganized. We're just trying to find things for inspiration. I'm having conversations with Rob. I just kicked over the high level idea. And that's really where it came from. It was, I think I sent Rob a text and I was just like, hey, we have this idea for a show. Think you would be a good fit for it. Here's kind of the high level view. We want to help people look better on camera for all the different projects that we're working on. Is this something that even speaks to you at all? And that was kind of like that first little nugget that I threw out there. And then Rob and I just had a series of conversations. And I think let me just go through some of the things that we have done, because I think that'll help then drive like some of the actual formal write-ups that we put in place. But the research and the development of the show before you even get pen to paper really entailed us going on YouTube and just consuming a lot of content. I mean, there are a couple things that I have here. Like we took a deep dive into all these different makeover series that are on YouTube. Of course, people probably, the first thing that comes to mind are like these HG TV shows, right? Where, you get this house that's, complete mess. And then you get these two real estate agents that come in and they have like this view of what this house can really be. And they remodel it and restructure it and then, it becomes someone's home at the end of the day. So there's like this transformation. And that was something that spoke to us was how can we showcase a transformation? How can we take someone's home video or home environment and make it something that's really appealing and they can look good on camera right from their home office? What if we could do that? What if we could show that transformation? So that was some of the research we did there, just try to understand how some YouTubers are structuring their show. So we watched a lot of videos. We were exchanging things back and forth. The other thing that we did talk through as well was trying to get a sense of all these behind the scenes shows. I mean, it's really popular with a lot of programs that are on, let's say, Apple TV, Hulu, Netflix. All of these shows have like a behind the scenes component that's developed in parallel to really help their audience get to know the characters, get to know the actors that are portraying the characters. And so we consumed a lot of those types of shows as well to just get an idea of how people are capturing the behind the scenes aspect of what they're doing. Because in a sense, that's also what we're doing with this show. We're kind of dissecting what it takes to go from, this really bad home setup to something that's very appealing, to where you look professional and that you feel confident on camera. So we want to be able to capture that transformation. So those are the two things that we did with YouTube specifically. And we were just going back and forth with different ideas and how we could develop our own show through that lens. And that kind of helped us when we actually met and started to work through the strategy. We already had some of this research in place.
Yeah. And on the other side of it too, we also have to set up the workflows for our team that goes into a new show as well. And that was something that we had in place this quarter, actually, Tristan, where you and I worked on building out, okay, so when somebody comes to us with a new show idea, how do we track that? And then how do we build it out into our workflow? And then once it's built out into our workflow, getting the host into the Slack channel with the other creators. And then from there, getting them into our customer and internal portal where they can submit episodes. So there's really a lot of work that goes in, both on the strategy side and on the execution side. And so that actually kind of leads to a question that I had for you, Tristan, is, so you mentioned the extreme home makeover type ideas or the makeover videos on YouTube or HGTV, and how, the goal of this show is going to be to help, it's not even hosts, it's just anyone who's professionally on camera. How are the episodes actually going to be executed?
Yeah, so I'll go through basically the 3 formats that we've landed on. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about something that we did. It's probably a little unique to this show that we don't do with all shows, but I think it can help people. And that is we did a lot of testing. So Rob, once we had these ideas circulating, we're working on the strategy. We developed the theme statement. So we had this high level view of what the show was designed to do. And that's what I read at the beginning of the episode. So we had that in place. We knew who the audience was. And so we were working through the formats and how we would structure different episodes. And so Rob actually filmed some test footage. He's like, what the hell? I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do this in reality, but let me film some things. So he brought one of his colleagues into his studio in Pittsburgh, and they basically just constructed a test episode and filmed it a lot of different ways. He had multiple cameras going, and we did that, which I think is a great idea, not only to understand a little bit more about how he would interact on camera with the audience, but also like some other parts that we were unsure about. Like, for instance, would Rob be the test subject in an episode? And if he was, how would he talk about his own kind of presence on camera where he's not like this outside view and he's working with another subject? So that was something we had to work through. And then also just the technical workflow. We are recording on Riverside right now, so it's a remote podcast recording platform. In this situation, Rob is recording on cameras in a studio, and everything's digital, and we're getting these really heavy files. So we had to figure out, all right, so what does the post-production workflow look like with this? If we're filming multiple cameras, are we going to sync them up beforehand before Motion receives those? Are you going to do that and compress them a little bit before they come over to our side? So we had to talk through some technical things as well. And that helps. I think it does jump ahead a little bit because you are getting into that technical discussion, but I think it does contribute to how you want to work out the structure and the format, how you actually want to execute each episode. So it was something that we were doing in tandem, which is rare. A lot of times when we develop a show, we lay out the full strategy, and it's like, here's exactly what we want to do with each episode. Here's how the conversation will be structured, or here's how the solo episode will be structured. But in this case, we were working on like a test episode at the same time we were developing the strategy. And that was a lot of fun for me. It was a little different than the normal approach that we take.
One thing stands out to me, and it may not be the goal of anything that you were just saying, but it's almost like if you have a studio, the post-production workflow is not more simple. That's something that we hear so often. People think that if they build a $20,000 studio and set up cameras, well, then everything's easy after that. And as you just heard, in those situations, it's actually quite complex when you're using a more studio-based environment. So I just thought that was funny because it does have to go into it. And when we wrote, and this is something that I think this show is also going to help with, is when people ask us these questions about hey, I'm thinking about setting up a studio environment, and then you and I go back and we ask them like 20 questions and they don't have the answers to any of them, it will be nice at least to be able to guide them to this show for solutions rather than us just like, are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to think about because we're used to dealing with 4K footage, et cetera, and multiple cameras, syncing footage, because that's how motion got started. And that was my background even before we created motion. But that said, you're trying to create a system because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Not every episode can be like this separate project. We do need some structure to how we're going to execute on each episode. And so that's the balance that Rob and I were trying to strike, because for our team on the post-production side, we can't like get a bunch of files and say, okay, what are we going to do with this? And then on the flip side, when Rob actually goes to record the content, he needs to understand how this will all be assembled, and he needs to have a plan in place and a script to follow. So it's like we had to work through some just test scenarios to figure out, all right, let's land on something that works for everyone. And so I think we have gotten to a spot that we've narrowed into 3 formats, which goes back to your question that you asked maybe 8 minutes ago that we'll get to. But the 3 different formats that we have, we decided on a makeover series format, and that really speaks to the transformation that we want to capture. So this might be a remote recording environment and a remote consulting scenario where we're working with someone who might be a host of our show or just really anyone in the community, and they're uncomfortable with their home recording setup, and they want that to really be completely revamped. And so what we're going to do is film the before and the after, and Rob is going to take someone through that transformation. We're going to capture that in an episode. The second format is tactical tips. So these are more smaller concepts in nature. For instance, how do I make a solid white background look somewhat attractive on camera? Or how do I get more depth? Or how do I kind of add some color to the frame? Or, some of these like small isolated challenges that people have, we're going to create these smaller, almost micro episodes where they might be like a 5 to 7 minute video that we then are able to have an audio form of that as well. So that's the second format. And then the third, we did want to have an interview component as well. So I think this will give us an opportunity to pull in people that are outside of the B2B marketing community, and we'll be able to pull in lighting directors, sound engineers, makeup artists. These are folks that are working on feature films and television commercials for large enterprises. And we're going to understand a little bit about how they approach being on camera. So we're able to tackle this from a lot of different perspectives. And then hopefully, we're always going to look through this through the lens of, hey, how can I, as a professional, as a marketer, as a CEO of a tech company, how can I look better on camera, be more confident, and present myself and my company in the best way possible? And so that's how we're always going to look at these different topics and things that we explore. But we feel like with this variety, it's really going to be interesting to explore these different formats, but it's also going to be a challenge because we don't really have a show that has all these different styles thus far. So kind of a good and bad thing here.
Yeah, I think it'll be good though, in the nature that I think our audience typically just hears from each other. And I think LinkedIn has a negative side to it in that, there are the people who are vocal, and those are the only people that you hear from. And one of the things that was most exciting to me about this show, and I think we've talked about it for years, Tristan, even doing something similar to this on this show. We try to bring in technology companies that are within the podcast space. We've had conversations about like, let's bring sound engineers onto this show or video people or what have you. But I think where this show is going to stand out is that people within B2B will get to hear from the best of the best. Not that there aren't great people in B2B, but you used yourself as an example. From my seat, and when Tristan and I met, I came and I worked with you on sales and marketing at your video agency. I would look at you as someone who was very video proficient. And I would like to think within B2B, people probably look at you that way as well. But then you look at these people who you find are I don't want to speak for you, but many steps ahead of you.
Several steps, yes.
Yeah, several steps. We'll use that. Ahead of you in their knowledge of very specific things. People who are very talented with sound, people who are very talented as cinematographers and directors of photography and what have you. And I think getting those people on and getting that perspective and bringing that to B2B is something new that you don't see often, if at all. A lot of times these people don't have voices within our space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one thing I'm excited about, is to just, go outside the traditional LinkedIn feed that like you said, the content that you see almost every day. So let's do something different. Let's pull in folks that aren't as well known in that particular community or the corner of the internet that we operate in. And so I think that'll be interesting there. And really, to just close it up, the other or last challenge I think that's going to be fun to explore is, this is such a visual show. And the one thing that we've worked through with Rob that I didn't mention a second ago is creating an audio only version of the video episode. So that's something that we're going to try, which we've never done before, where, let's take that makeover scenario. If you think about a makeover series, it's really visual. You have to see the impact, the before and the after. So if you don't see that, how do you capture that in a podcast format? And there were two options that we had. One was, we just don't have an audio version. We just don't release one for that episode that comes out. And then the other alternative that we landed on was, let's do a short 5 to 7 minute audio episode that's really built around the approach that was taken for that makeover episode. So for instance, Rob is going to, we'll have a script format, basically articulate, like, here's the challenge, here's the scenario that this person was involved in. They are stuck in an attic, there were no windows, and it was a small room. So here are the three things that I prioritized as we went to make over this space and make it appear more professional on camera. So all that is going to be done in an audio form, and then we'll encourage people to check out the slightly longer form video episode on YouTube. So that's what we're going to try, and we'll see how that works. So I don't even know if I've talked to you about that yet. I might be new. Yeah.
News to me. Sounds like a lot of work. But I think, and it's something you talked about earlier. I have to imagine that it is interesting working with a creative, more creative person on show ideation. Because I've been in enough of those meetings. I have to imagine that there wasn't a shortage of ideas, and combining the lack of shortage of ideas, so ideas aplenty, with actual execution is always a very interesting dichotomy, right? It's like, that's great. And I deal with this because, I serve very heavily on the customer side at Motion, right? I work with all of our customers. I have weekly meetings with our customers. And there's always this, hey, Justin, what do you think about this idea? And then I have to balance saying, I think the idea is great. How do we plan on executing? And so I have to imagine in some of those conversations with Rob Rusher, the host, that there was definitely that balance of, yes, these are all good ideas, but how will we actually do them? So that's going to be interesting to see all of that come together.
Well, it was tough because we both came at the project with our own ideas, and then we're both also checking ourselves, like, all right, what is this actually going to take? Because, you're starting a new project. So, and this is what we advise our customers, like you're saying, that you don't want to jump so many levels ahead before you have a chance to test things, see what's working. So we don't want to make things so complex that it takes so long to get one of these episodes out, where it's like you just take a deep breath after you're done. You're like, yeah, I don't even want to do an episode 2. So we have to balance, getting something very creative out and new with the fact that we actually have to deliver. So that's always something that I wrestle with. I know our customers wrestle with that, how to be different and how to be unique while at the same time being consistent. And I don't think it's a problem that will ever be solved. It's just a journey that you have to go through. You have to kind of bump up against those edges and figure out where it is in order to, really get in the comfort zone that you're producing something valuable for your customers and you're actually solving problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something I run into all the time is like, we haven't even hit episode 1 yet of a show. And people are like, all right, Justin, we've got these 25 ideas for episodes and they're all different. And I'm like, I don't want to stifle your creativity. It's something I tell all of our customers is like, you are the creative director of your own show. Your show can be whatever you want it to be. It's your show and there's not a right way to do it. But I'm here to make sure that this is a podcast. It is an ongoing initiative. Let's get number 1 out, and maybe let's get number 2 and number 3 and number 4. And if we get 4 out, then maybe let's have a conversation about how to do a separate type of episode. And then from there, let's go and, do a separate type of episodes. I've seen shows that are weekly shows that have a different style of episode every time, and they come out of the gates and, they do 3 months worth of episodes and then they're exhausted, and you want to avoid that. You want to make it so you're excited to do your show. And you look at this show, Tristan, I was having a conversation with one of our customers this morning, actually. And I was like, it's really cool. We started out as an interview-based show and we've really evolved over time. And I'm really excited about the next 3 episodes I'm doing. The next 3 episodes of recorded content that I'm doing are this episode, which is like 2 founders talking to each other about marketing initiatives. I'm recording my next episode, which is going to be an episode where I review some of the previous episodes that we've done on content logistics. So you talk about like our media arm. I'm pulling in another one of our shows and I'm going to be giving commentary on what's happening in that show. And I'm doing another episode where I'm actually serving as the person being interviewed on my own show. So these are all different styles of episode outside of interview-based episodes. But between the 2 of us, we've recorded, between this and our previous podcast, Tech Qualified, like 500 episodes of podcasts. So this didn't happen overnight. We've bolted on new styles, and this is a new style here today, over time, and really built into making sure each style of episode that we do, we're very comfortable with how we're going to lay it out. We feel like it's going to be something that we can repeat, and it's not a giant, boulder to move for each episode, or as you referred to, each episode shouldn't feel like a project. It should feel like it's part of an ongoing podcast initiative.
Yep. Yeah, and that's probably a good place to end. I mean, this episode here is going to be a part of hopefully a longer series that we do where we kind of pop in at different points in time with On Camera, On Brand, and talk about the progress of the show. But basically, this gets us up to speed of where we are right now. We are solidifying the strategic action plan, which will be the blueprint for the show. And we're working on identifying and confirming those first 2, 3, 4 episodes, because we want to have a plan. We want to hit on all the different formats so that we can find, are there some gaps that we need to fill? Do we like one format more than the other? So we're going to just do one episode for each of those formats. And then we're going to take it from there and kind of make an assessment and figure out, where we go moving forward. But that really gets us up to speed. And, the next time that we jump back on for On Camera, On Brand, we'll probably talk about what the hell happened with the first episode and how that went. So what do you think? Good spot to end?
Yeah, that works for me. Yeah, I mean, I hope we get a chance to not only come back and discuss on camera on brand, but we have these handful of shows and we've done episodes referencing them, highlighting them. But from the anonymous marketer to content logistics to taking the lead to the notorious thought leader to slice and dice. I mean, there's a lot that we're working on and doing that, I think it would be fun to talk to the audience about and just say, hey, this is what goes into not only launching a great show, but this new idea. It's not new. You've been hearing it for years of turning your company into a media company. But really what it takes to do that. And it's not just a switch that you flip. There's a lot that goes into it.
Thanks for listening to Recorded Content, a show brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcasting agency for B2B tech marketers. We do the podcast stuff so you can focus on strategy, building brand awareness, and developing new relationships. To learn more about how you can launch and grow a podcast for your company, check out motionagency.io. Thanks for listening to Recorded Content.